Hello, I'm Barbara Lister-Sink, and I send you my warmest greetings from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, in the United States. I'm both thrilled and honored to be a part of this 2020 ISME Global Conference. And it's wonderful to think of connecting with all of you across the globe. As we all know, we're in the midst of a terrible pandemic, one that is affecting the lives of countless people throughout the world. Ironically, I will be speaking in my presentation about another sort of pandemic, one that is certainly not deadly, but one that nevertheless adversely affects the lives of thousands of pianists across the globe. It can be devastating professionally and personally. I'm speaking about this plague of playing-related injury that afflicts so many pianists. Over the course of their careers, over 50% of pianists may experience some sort of playing-related injury. This is unacceptably high. My teaching career over the last 50 years has been wonderfully fulfilling. But over that half century, I have become acquainted with what I call the shadow side of our piano world. I have taught numerous pianists who have suffered from playing-related injuries, and I've dedicated much of my career to try to help them regain their ability to play. In this presentation, with the help of my very inspiring students, I wish to give voice to the untold stories of those pianists and to their arduous path from injury to recovery. So, what is it like to be an injured pianist? Most injured pianists suffer alone and in silence, and often with little support or help when injury strikes. But if we become injured, it is a constant struggle. We can find ourselves caught in a web of confusion, anger, frustration, despair, and even hopelessness. There often seems to be little way out of this maze of injury. Why am I so passionate about this topic? Because I have a personal acquaintance with this shadow side of our piano world. I can't remember when I began playing the piano, but it was before I could talk. The piano became my ticket to a rich, romantic, and deeply fulfilling inner world. But at age 16, while practicing to play Beethoven's Third Concerto, everything changed. I awoke with a burning sensation in my right arm. It felt like it was going to fall off. It was useless. My mother found a doctor who gave me daily cortisone shots, and I somehow managed to perform the concerto. But the injury persisted for 6 more years. No one could help me. I continued to play, but I lost confidence and always feared the pain would return. My fingers would stop moving, and I would have to stop playing in the middle of a concert. It led to tremendous self-doubt and feelings of worthlessness. My best friend had become my worst enemy. Luckily, while living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, I met an extraordinary teacher who helped me recover from injury. That experience set me on a lifelong path to help other pianists heal from injury or prevent injury altogether. But other pianists have not been so lucky. Playing-related injuries can be devastating. What gave pianists the greatest joy now gives them pain. The piano, their friend for life, becomes their enemy. They often say they cannot speak because they have lost their voice, along with their hopes and their dreams. Here are some of their reflections. From a 26-year-old female pianist, she wrote, "The pain can be excruciating at times when I play. I've had to keep from crying while performing." And then a very talented, motivated 13-year-old female pianist wrote, "For the last 5 years, I've had severe tension and nerve damage in my right arm." She goes on to say that the doctors offered her an operation, but they also told her that she would never play more than a half hour a day. And a 24-year-old female pianist wrote, "The first 9 years of playing were full of love, joy, and no pressure. But getting injured my junior year was both physically and mentally painful. Not being able to play without pain felt like a personal failure, a loss of identity. It was a lonely experience with people sympathizing with you, but not fully understanding what you were going through. And then a 27-year-old male doctoral student wrote, "The doctor said I had tendinitis. I could not write anymore at school. I was really depressed because I could not play the piano. It was a difficult time psychologically, the first time in my life that I could not be perfect at what I do. For almost 8 years, it was an ongoing battle between limitations, shame, and sometimes pain, until it finally completely broke down." And then a 24-year-old jazz pianist who came to me with a serious injury wrote a long reflection, but I think this reflection really focuses on the various threads that go through the lives of the injured pianists and the obstacles they encounter. He wrote, "I used to think that playing-related injuries only happened to other people. Now, with this pervasive attitude staring back at me from colleagues and teachers, I realize that no one can understand until it happens to them. My former teacher suggested that I sit on the floor and raise my arms up to practice scales and other technical exercises, thus isolating the finger muscles to improve digital facility. After playing like this for a few days, I began experiencing sharp pain in my shoulders, neck, upper arms, and chest. Even though I stopped the exercise, the injury persisted, and this first injury seemed to open the gateway to many more conditions." And he then goes on to say that he suffered a lack of acceptance and in some ways understanding from teachers and academic institutions. He went through a litany of medical professionals and had the feelings of hopelessness and despondency, a leitmotif that continues to come back with all of these pianists. He writes, "I'll never forget my college professor's response that I would hear for the rest of my college career. You know, when people say they have hand problems, sometimes I think the problem is in their head rather than in their hands. Just be careful. Take an ibuprofen and keep practicing." But then he writes, "Worst of all is the feeling of increasing pain that cannot be stopped as I attempt to make music. This may sound absurd, but the frustration evoked the desire to cut open my arm and rip out my ulnar nerve and stomp on it, though I realized this would be counterproductive." And I might add, eventually he recovered fully, and his good sense of humor, as you see there at the very end, did carry him through a great deal of suffering. Now let's hear Anna's reflection in her own voice.
Imagine for a moment that your life has taken an unexpected turn, that your vocation, your means of providing for yourself, your identity, your passion, your hopes and dreams for your life, and the avenue by which you express the innermost parts of who you are all being threatened. The thing that you once loved so dearly is now causing you daily pain. You see doctor after physician after specialist, and no one can tell you exactly what is going on. It has become difficult to accomplish the simple day-to-day tasks like cooking a meal, cleaning the house, taking notes in class, and even bathing yourself. You feel out of control. You feel powerless and confused and hurting. Every day is a challenge. This is the lived experience of musicians dealing with playing-related injuries.
As I was preparing this presentation, the world lost one of the most beloved pianistic and musical giants of our times, Leon Fleischer. His contributions to the global music world were as boundless as was his generosity of spirit. I was lucky enough in several private lessons in the 1970s to experience his musical genius, his kindness, and his limitless energy firsthand. But Leon Fleischer brought playing-related injury to international visibility. He himself suffered the devastating loss of the use of his right hand. Vocal dystonia was the primary diagnosis. His playing-related injury came to great prominence in the 1970s. After that, he paved a courageous path for countless injured pianists. With his courage, resilience, and positive spirit, Leon Fleischer showed them how to turn a potentially career-destroying loss into a tool for creativity, innovation, and deeper connection with their own humanity through music. So what are these various playing-related musculoskeletal or neuromusculoskeletal disorders? There are many, and these are but a few. The list is long, and injuries or disorders are often highly complex. There are warning signs, though: fatigue, soreness, burning, tingling, pain, numbness. And after that, it begins perhaps with tendonitis or tenosynovitis, but then it can morph fairly quickly into various other nerve entrapments, various other syndromes, and finally, perhaps into focal dystonia, as Leon Fleischer experienced. Let's examine for a moment what scientists and researchers in the field of performing arts medicine have revealed. There's definitely a very high rate of injury in spite of all the best efforts of researchers, scientists, performing arts medicine people. In '98, the PRNDs were between 39 and 87% in one particular study, and between 26 and 93% for musicians in 2005 in another study, and chillingly in 2006, for those of us female pianists with smaller hands, 77% of those studied in Japan had sustained injuries. And also in Australia, 2010, 71.9% of professional pianists, male and female, had experienced playing-related injury. And as the American Journal of Industrial Medicine stated, among classical musicians, women are 2 times more likely than men to suffer occupational injury. Many pianists find it very difficult to obtain an accurate diagnosis and effective treatment. Many of my students have been to several dozen healthcare providers over several years, sometimes 10 years, and diagnosis may be inaccurate or incomplete, and subsequent treatments can range from highly effective to slightly helpful and to ineffective and even to harmful. It truly is difficult to find healthcare providers with experience in these complex disorders and injuries that pianists and musicians experience. So what are the consequences of playing-related injuries? They are many. Financial and academically, the scholarship can be jeopardized or taken away. Students must drop out, often playing-related assignments, ensembles, and even out of school. Professionally, it jeopardizes potential for playing opportunities and gigs. It can even lead to loss of promotion or position if a pianist has a college job, or if an organist, who is also a pianist, has a church job. Emotionally and socially, a great toll is taken. I have heard of depression, disconsolation, feelings of worthlessness, inferiority, inadequacy, hopelessness, loss of motivation and purpose, and lots of grief. Personally, family, friends, teachers, and administrators try very hard to be helpful, but sometimes they cannot be helpful because solutions can't be found, and so they sometimes doubt the seriousness of the problem. Even accusations of laziness, self-pity, and hypochondria are leveled at some injured pianists. So why do pianists become injured? Well, piano playing is a highly complex activity. I love this quote from Homer W. Smith, a noted physiologist. The most intricately and perfectly coordinated of all voluntary movements in the animal kingdom are those of the human hand and fingers, and perhaps in no other human activity do memory, complex integration, and muscular coordination surpass the achievements of the skilled pianist. And then, from a neuroscience point of view, noted neurologist Frank R. Wilson, who was also a fine amateur pianist, wrote, "No other activity in which we engage requires the accuracy, speed, timing, smoothness, or coordination of muscular contraction exhibited in finished musical performance." So we should all pat ourselves on the back as pianists, I think. I certainly tell my students that. We are, in fact, as researchers say, artist athletes. has been written that advanced piano playing is one of the most demanding activities known to humankind, a complex interaction of musculoskeletal, neuromuscular, sensory motor systems. And we are like dancers and artistic athletes. We combine these subtle, highly complex motor skills with very high artistic demands. I love this poster because it really says it all with the toe shoe and the bobsled team. Here are some wonderful examples of our other artist athletes, skaters, beautiful dancers, and a wonderful young pianist who coordinates beautifully and just as complexly as her friends in dance and gymnastics and skating, but with primarily small muscles. And here's a great example of the athletic side. Vladimir Horowitz plays the Schumann toccata, Robert Schumann toccata, 4 minutes and 20 seconds, which is pretty extraordinary. You can hear it on YouTube. That's 24.1 notes per second. And as Dr. Hewlings Jackson wrote in 1873 about this kind of playing, he said a speed of 20 to 30 notes per second may involve 400 to 600 separate motor actions. It's quite extraordinary. It's hard to believe just how Olympian a pianist coordination needs to be. But here are the risk factors. There are a number of risk factors, but these are just some of them. Obviously, repetitive motion, which often, with pianists who are not trained in certain technique, will lead to an accumulation of tension. Then there's excessive practice and overloading of the body, the over-challenging of repertory that we're not ready to coordinate yet, insufficient time for preparation, sudden increase in practicing, which can happen in college, or if suddenly we have to play a concert and be ready for it very shortly. Then the lack of general awareness of the body. We're not listening to our muscles, so they start tightening up. Then there are genetic conditions such as hypermobility and physical anomalies. Lifestyle also plays quite a role in injury. Sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, and then, of course, personal and professional stress all can factor in as risks for injury. Joint hypermobility is not an injury, but a potential risk for injury. And I think it's very important that we all, as teachers and pianists who might have it, realize this. It's not caused by inefficient technique or faulty biomechanics. It's not something we can control, but it can undermine the pianist's ability to develop technically and often will have a cascading effect into other injuries. Musicians and females are more likely to be hypermobile, and it does have serious negative effects. This is a photo of a wonderful lady that I met after a concert several years ago, and we were talking about hypermobility, and she said, "Oh, can I show you this?" And there it is. And I'm sure anyone looking at this who teaches the piano or plays recognizes that the push-down MCP joints, the knuckles there, and then also the DIP joints at the last joint of the fingers. That is quintessential hypermobility. Luckily, there are devices and various things we can find on the internet, and my students use these plastic-sized braces to great success in maintaining a really wonderful arch and in stabilizing the joints for load bearing. The really critical risk factor I'm finding more and more, not only in my female pianists, but also in myself as my hand shrinks a bit from arthritis. The really critical risk factor is this ergonomic mismatch between hand size and keyboard size. The elephant in the room of risk factors for pianist injuries is this very thing. It is increasingly implicated in numerous studies. This mismatch is linked in part to the disturbing studies that have found female pianists twice as likely to get injured from playing. If you go on the internet and Steinbuehler and Company, you can find this hand chart and measure your own hand. And then after that, you can see, once you've measured your hand, you can then see from this chart that was created in 2015 in an Australian study by Boyle, and Booker, of 473 pianists just what size keyboard is appropriate for your particular handspan. Believe me, it's a revelation to many pianists. And here's the chart to show it. Males have come in at 24% with small hands, and females with 87%. And when they say small hands, they're saying that these hands are not the right size. They're too small for the conventional keyboard. This would also, of course, include children. This gigantic difference in size becomes abundantly clear in this photo of David, whom you will meet later, and me comparing our hands. And we would both be expected to play the same fortissimo in a Rachmaninoff etude. That's like asking a small female golfer to use clubs of a large male golfer and to hit the ball the same length down the fairway. This playing field is not level. One of the most crucial risk factors for injury is faulty technique. Pianists have enough challenges without this. I'm defining technique here as not what we play, but how we use our bodies directed by our brain to play what we play. And if we don't understand the principles of good coordination and good biomechanics and apply them to our playing, we definitely risk injury, as these silly little drawings attempt to illustrate. Inefficient on the left and efficient on the right. That does not mean that little Joey there is less musical than Maria on the right, but it might mean that Joey would have a harder time realizing his musical potential. So how can teachers prevent injury in their students? We all need to cultivate kinesthetic awareness of the whole body. Awareness is the key to well-coordinated injury preventive technique. We start by recognizing that we play the piano with our entire body, not just with the arms, hands, and fingers. Our brain directs the signals to the muscles, and those signals must travel a long pathway through the spine and out to the upper and lower extremities. So optimal alignment is critical from the brain down to the fingers. We also need to develop our self-sensing kinesthetic awareness through somatic education, such as Alexander technique, Feldenkrais method, or other similar disciplines. And thanks to the tireless efforts of researchers, scientists, and healthcare providers in the performing arts medicine field, we have wonderful resources worldwide available to us over the internet, on YouTube, and in workshops sponsored by our music organizations worldwide, such as ISME. Then we can start better acquainting ourselves with the hallmarks of good coordination and injury prevention, efficient muscle use, optimal alignment, and non-accumulation of tension. We also need to choose our repertoire wisely. If the pianist is overchallenged or does not have enough time to fully download the program of technical demands to the body and brain, then we will risk injury. It's not how many notes we play or how loud and fast we play them. It's about making music and feeling as if we are truly in command of our coordination on any level of complexity. It may seem overwhelming what we need to know as teachers and pianists, but help us on the way from various disciplines and their experts that we can now call upon in an interdisciplinary manner to create a village of collaboration. One word of caution. We must always seek out reliable, credible, reputable, and scientifically and pedagogically informed sources. Bogus, quasi-scientific, and dubious websites and YouTube videos have sprung up like toadstools after a rain. Please search for only the most reputable and credible information, just as you would if you were seeking medical information. Quackery of any form, even well-intended, may do more harm than good. And I have made a handout available with this presentation that lists these resources. So what I'd like now is to let my own beloved graduate students, past and present, speak in their own words about their experiences on the arduous road from injury to recovery.
Hi, my name is Ekin Cemre Üstüner. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. I started my piano education when I was 6 years old. Throughout the first 6 to 7 years, I had no problems related to injuries, but as the repertoire started getting harder and my technique was not supportive of the repertoire that I was playing, so I started having playing related injuries. Before that, when I was 16, I was diagnosed with 4 herniated discs in my back. I was diagnosed with hypermobility, and I was diagnosed with scoliosis. As I was trying to overcompensate for that part of my body, I started developing more issues regarding my arms. As I practiced for my graduation at the age of 18, having a full repertoire of 80-minute long solo recital, a full concerto, and a chamber music performance, I wasn't able to keep up with the work. I was practicing 10 to 15 hours a day, and my body just couldn't handle it. And back to back, I was diagnosed with chronic tenosynovitis. And eventually my doctor said that unless I have a way of not lifting my fingers, there's no way that I could play again, because he kept treating me and I kept going back with more pain. I have to stop playing completely for 6 months. So after 6 months of despair and just depression, I decided that I don't want to be in that mental place anymore, and I just want to go to the United States to learn English better. When I started my first master's, everything seemed fine until I started going back to my old playing habits. And then I got injured multiple times, but the biggest one was right after my graduation recital. I couldn't handle Prokofiev Sonata. I couldn't move my fingers a week after the recital, and I thought that I don't want to deal with this anymore. I need to find something else. I need to find a solution. In my 2 years in Salem College, I completely changed the way I live. I have to start exercising regularly. I have to start eating much better. Sleep schedule was crucial. I adapted the ways that I play, and I adapted the ways that I practice. My work with Dr. Lucier Singh was from the foundational level up until the advanced repertoire, and we carefully worked on everything, on each step, and that's what retraining takes. And I am trying to make sure that none of my students have to go through these things. So we work very carefully from the beginning, and it is very exciting to see the joy they have when they get to play things with no pain and freedom.
My name is David. I'm a pianist and piano teacher here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, USA. I remember about 15 years ago, as a junior in high school, I was working on the third movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and I wanted to play that piece as fast and as loud as I possibly could in order to make an impressive recording to send off to the colleges that I was applying for. But as I practiced, I remember my arms felt more and more heavy and tight and painful. But I didn't care. I just kept powering through because I had to make as impressive a recording as possible. I made the recording and I got into the school that I wanted to go to. But about halfway through my first semester, I realized that I was not going to be able to continue the piano lessons because I couldn't even play a C major scale without this intense pain. And so I didn't know what to do. I really wanted to play the piano, but I shifted focus for my degree into music composition. So I would compose and give pieces to other musicians to play, but I wasn't able to play anything myself. And this was really frustrating, and I was depressed and felt like I was drifting. I went to various physical therapists, and they would give me exercises that would help to alleviate the pain, but then I would dive back into playing the piano, and the pain would come right back again because the whole problem was my very tight technique. That's the only way I knew how to play. But then halfway through my junior year, I attended Dr. Lucier Singh's intensive training workshop. And that's where I learned that I wasn't the only one in this boat, that there are people all over the world, actually, that have similar playing-related injury and discomfort. And also I learned that there's a way of retraining your piano technique so that you can play with a more free and body-friendly, efficient approach to the instrument. So this turned the tide for me emotionally. I powered through my senior year and I came back to study with Dr. Lister Sink, and I went through that retraining. I learned how to play the piano in a much uh, freer, less tight way that felt good, and also gave me even more of the musical result that I wanted. I could play faster, I could play louder, but it felt easier. Um, and I also continued to seek out the Council of Healthcare Practitioners, and I learned that I had some cubital tunnel syndrome, nerve entrapment in the right elbow. And I was advised to get surgery, ulnar nerve transposition surgery, but I found that by making various lifestyle changes like eating well and exercising regularly, Alexander technique, I was able to get to the point where the pain is almost non-existent now, and I'm able to function well as a pianist, and I didn't have to have surgery. So I'm grateful for the way that this journey has turned out. Now I can teach these principles to my own students.
Hello everyone, my name is Wong. I'm currently finishing a master's degree in piano with an emphasis in injury preventive technique at Salem College. My injury journey started 3.5 years ago in Canada. It was an accident that I was lifting a very heavy instrument and pulled out my right shoulders. Along with that, I have a lot of tension with my playing around my neck, so I always forward my neck, and also I was abducting a lot while I'm playing. My feeling about getting injured and practicing towards my undergrad recitals was really hard time. It hurt me a lot in the practice room that I feel like I'm independent but could not seek more help in my own way. The isolated feeling as a pianist who got injury is really strong impact on me during my undergraduate years. After 2 years of studying under Dr. Lister Sink's studio, I feel so much better about my alignment and the way I play the pianos and how it freed my body from pain and injury. The retraining at Salem College helped me so much that I could build my technique back from the step-by-step from the fundamentals. And I feel so much better after went through the fundamentals of the technique and helped me play higher repertoires that could achieve what I want to play as a pianist. Also, the proper biomechanics models that we're using here to play the piano freed my neck, my shoulders, and all my trapezius muscles that I could listen more to what I'm playing and listening to the dynamic crescendos and the musicalities that I have. After the retraining, I had so much freedom in my playing, and I hope all the pianists who are suffering from discomfort, from injury will seek help. And I think the community we have here is really supportive for me, and I hope the support will always be with you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Celeste Watson. I'm a pianist and a music teacher in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was 17 when I got injured. After I finished one day playing the piano and just being in so much pain, I remember going upstairs to my room and curling up in my bed and just feeling so confused about why my body was doing this to me, and feeling so sad and out of control, like me and the piano were kind of pointless because I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I remember going through cycles of being really excited that maybe this new doctor would be able to help me, and then feeling really discouraged after treatment because nothing seemed to help. And that cyclical feeling of excitement and discouragement was really emotionally exhausting. I was living at home at the time, and when my family would play classical piano music, I would ask them to turn it off. It just reminded me of all the things I couldn't do, all the sensations that I couldn't have. It was horrible to see like all the people around me who could play and do all these wonderful things and have all these experiences, and I couldn't, and I didn't know why, and I didn't know why my body was doing this. There were a lot of feelings of shame because I couldn't output like other pianists around me could output. I couldn't output at the same level. It took about 10 years of looking for a solution to begin to put the pieces together about what was going on with my injury. And I eventually came to find out it was a combination of some chronic health problems combined with some things I was doing at the instrument technically that were not serving me. When I came to work with Dr. Lister Sink, that was a big turning point for me. I was able to really learn to know my body and listen to my body. able to use my body in a more efficient way, in a way that didn't exacerbate the chronic pain that I had. Those 10 years, I'll never get those back. That's 10 years of practicing that I'll never get back. But I do like my playing better now because I can listen more. I can be more connected with the instrument. I can be more connected with the audience. I feel freer when I play. Musicality was always this thing that I could kind of get in the right mood and then be musical, but I didn't have a reliable mechanism for producing musicality. And since retraining and since dealing with some of these injury issues, I feel like I have a much more reliable way to be musical. And I'm really thankful for what I've learned.
So, what can teachers do if a student actually develops an injury? During the course of our musical careers as performers and teachers, we may encounter injury, either our own, or a colleague, or a friend, or a student. So, what can we do? Initially, we listen sympathetically, try to ease their fears. We immediately ascertain the nature and severity of the pain. We may respond with a protocol for acute injury that athletes use: price, protection, rest, ice, compression, and elevation. However, if the pain, swelling, burning, whatever the symptoms are, persist, the student or friend must see a respected healthcare provider who is experienced in repetitive motion injuries and who understands the occupational risks that pianists face. We, as teachers, must never attempt to diagnose. But we can help the pianist develop a well-organized record of the chronology and details of the problem, the location, where the pain started, what the pianist was doing at the time, either at the piano or away from the piano, the nature of the pain or the discomfort, how long it lasted, when it stopped, etc. And then we must ask the pianist to stop playing, if only temporarily, until the source of the problem is found and an accurate diagnosis is made, and a plan of rehabilitation is created. And then during the retraining rehabilitation period, it's so important that we develop a partnership with the healthcare providers. We allow the student or ourselves to take necessary time for healing. We urge the pianist to think of the piano as a partner in rehabilitation, no matter how fundamental the work. We have to build back that friendship. So we also need to build in sufficient rest and time for the body and brain to download the new program. And in general, while recovering, we or our students need a supportive, respectful, positive environment for learning and for healing. And we need to reassure the pianist that we'll try to help her obtain accurate diagnosis, treatment, and plan for rehabilitation in an ongoing way. Because sometimes we go down a path with a dead end and we have to back up and then try something different. I always try to encourage my students to enjoy the process of retraining on the journey to the goal of healing, and always allow the pianist to maintain hope in healing and in a future in music. And always remember, the pianist's total health is of the greatest importance. We will close with an informal Zoom gathering recently of these 4 wonderful, courageous pianists who shared their stories with you earlier. Their message continues to be one of hope, and their desire is to help others and themselves to travel long, healthful, and joyous paths in music for the rest of their lives. Good morning to all of you.
Right.
From hot and humid North Carolina. I'm really happy that all of you are here, David, Celeste, Annie, and Ekin. And I thank you so much already for your individual stories that you've told us. As we discussed for the 2020 ISME conference, the arduous path from injury to recovery. And all of you have been on it. And it's sort of like a theme and variations, I guess. And you've given your variations.
I'll start out just by saying, piggybacking off what you said about the importance of community, there are 3, I would say, important moments that kind of are milestones for me. And the starting point that I remember very clearly was when I was around 16 years old and I was practicing at home, working on advanced repertoire. And I felt like I really, really want to play this music, but I have no clue technically what to do. And I just went harder and harder, and I got to the point where it really hurt to play. And I started to kind of feel this kind of hatred toward the instrument that I previously loved. So I remember sitting there feeling pretty devastated and like, I don't know where to go. And then a few years later was at the workshop, the intensive training workshop. And the most significant thing about that moment for me was I actually realized how many more people have the same problem. And as human beings, we need that. We need to know that we're not alone. Because when I was at home practicing, I felt totally alone. Like my dad, who also plays, he couldn't help me, and my friends who play, they didn't know what to tell me. And then the third moment would be years after retraining, where I had finished my recital and everyone was telling me not, oh wow, you play so fast, but how moved they were by the music. And I felt like this has come full circle, because that's what I really wanted to do, was to contribute musically to a community of people. You know, that's what musicians love to do. And so the community factor has always been, I think, the most important thing in keeping me on track, because all of us here, we have, you know, stuck with it and we're strong, but I think none of us would have been able to do this without the community.
I think kind of the opposite of what David said. That's so true. And I think the opposite can happen when you're not in an environment that is able to support you the way that maybe that environment wishes it could. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the people or the institutions that are there, but they're just not equipped to understand. And the opposite can really easily happen. I just remember feeling so alone and so completely like a phony, like I didn't belong, like I was an imposter, because I went from working on, you know, sonatas and etudes and all kinds of stuff that were really fun to play and were kind of show off, but it was fun. And I remember after I got my injury, I was in upper high school when I got injured, and I remember going from playing that rep, backing down and playing upper elementary, late intermediate rep, and just this feeling of, I don't ever want to even be at the piano, because I feel so completely not myself and so embarrassed and so humiliated by what's happened, and I can't even play intermediate Christmas rep without being in incredible pain. And just the feeling that I didn't belong. And even the people who loved me and the people who were supporting me during that time, there wasn't really anything that they could do to change that feeling, that horrible feeling that I was alone and this would never go away, and that I didn't belong.
And I feel that that's a big part of it. Even in this country, you don't have the conservatory system the same way that I had in Turkey. So when you look at it from outside, you might think that there is a community because everybody is a musician. You're in it since you're a kid, basically. You are growing up in that community. But like Celeste said, it's not to blame anybody or any institution. It's just they are not well equipped to deal with any problems related to injuries, because that's not the ultimate goal. It is very goal-oriented. It is not process-oriented. And having that community, the support system, is all about the process. Because we might be working towards a goal, but without the process being healthy and positive, supportive, there's no way that we can actually reach there with the positivity, with the beautiful results that we get in this. So it's not only about the technique, but it's about changing how we live, changing how we think about ourselves, our instrument, our music, and even how we interact with people, how we support them, as well as how they support us. It's a whole different game to recover from an injury, and community is a huge part of it.
Related to my experience in Canada and China, I think most of us as pianists practice alone and constantly self-reflecting in the room alone. That for me personally, feels very, very lonely, as Celeste said. But also, the sound is always transforming. So
we will hear others playing in another room, and constantly competing with each other but not seeing each other will be the worst situation, like in any school. Like in US, in Canada, it's the same. And there's another thing, like I love to break into other people's practice room. I'm like, how are you? Is everything fine? But the most thing I heard is, I'm fine, and then I see them do this. The tiredness that they won't share with anybody else because they assume that the system that will help or the community that will support is not there. So the lack of awareness that to know the system is there to help, and the kindness, like not gonna attack, not gonna judge. And we know when we do this, we need to stop, and we know how to help each other when we break into practice, rather than, oh, you're fine, and I left.
And we can only help that our words have helped some people to understand more. And I know that there are many, many wonderful people throughout the world who are doing the same thing, and wonderful, generous-hearted teachers and administrators and doctors. And we just need to keep connecting with those people and create a global village to help others. So thank you so much. Can't wait to see you again. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye to our audience. And we'll hope to see you all soon. As I hope you have seen and heard, the rate of playing-related injury worldwide is far too high, and the consequences too devastating. But there is hope. We are working together worldwide to educate, to create resources, to build supportive networks and curricula and programs so that future generations of pianists can avoid these playing-related injuries. I'm so proud of my students. I'm proud of them for their resilience, for their patience, for their discipline, for their truth-seeking, for their compassion, and for their positive spirit. If they are the future of music, then our future is bright. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Please stay safe and healthy, and continue to enrich the world with your music.